So the healing was really about like me finally just like turning into the reality that I had to develop a relationship with money. And it was really scary.
Welcome to the Personal Finance for PhDs podcast, a higher education in personal finance. This podcast is for PhDs and PhDs-to-be who want to explore the hidden curriculum of finances to learn the best practices for money management, career advancement, and advocacy for yourself and others. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Roberts, a financial educator specializing in early career PhDs and founder of Personal Finance for PhDs. This is Season 20, Episode 4, and today my guest is Danielle De La Mare, a career wellness coach and facilitator and the person behind Self-Compassionate Professor. Danielle recounts how she reached a crisis point in her career and personal life that led her to quit her tenured professorship. This crisis included a financial component due to her avoidant money mindset. Danielle describes how she is healing in the area of finances, especially in relationship with her husband, using self-compassionate practices. Danielle and I draw parallels between time management and money management to keep both in balance and sustainable. Danielle ends the interview by teaching 2 quick self-compassion practices that you can apply immediately to your financial life. The tax year 2024 version of my tax return preparation workshop, How to Complete Your PhD Trainee Tax Return and Understand It Too, is now available. This pre-recorded educational workshop explains how to identify, calculate, and report your higher education-related income and expenses on your federal tax return. Whether you are a graduate student, postdoc, or postbac, domestic or international, there is a version of this workshop designed just for you. While I do sell these workshops to individuals, I prefer to license them to universities so that the graduate students, postdocs, and postbacs can access them for free. Would you please reach out to your graduate school, graduate student government, postdoc office, international house, fellowship coordinator, etc., to request that they sponsor this workshop for you and your peers? You can find more information about licensing these workshops at pfforphds.com/tax-workshops. Please pass that page on to the potential sponsor. Thank you so much for doing so. You can find the show notes for this episode at pfforphds.com/S20E4. Without further ado, here's my interview with Danielle De La Mare of Self-Compassionate Professor. Delighted to have joining me on the podcast today, Dr. Danielle De La Mare of Self-Compassionate Professor. And this podcast interview came to be from an unusual path, which is that we both work with Dr. Jill Hoffman, who you heard from last season in an interview. So Jill thought it was a great idea to get me and Danielle together, and we agreed. So we're doing this interview now, and I'm really excited. We're going to talk about the intersections of money with other aspects of life management, and Danielle has a lot of unique perspective on this. So Danielle, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast, and will you please introduce yourself a little bit further for the audience?
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. I'm Danielle De La Mare, and I have been what I call a career wellness coach to mostly mid-career academics for the last several years, since 2019. And sometimes I have early career academics, sometimes I have postdocs, sometimes I have later career academics that I work with, full professors. But basically, these are people who have hit a wall in their career. They're not feeling alive in their career. They're not feeling joy. They're not feeling well. And basically, I have a group program that sort of works them through that. Now, I myself earned tenure in 2018 and then quit my job right after that. So the way I engaged with academia myself was very hard on my body. I was very overwhelmed all the time. I was very stressed all the time. I hit burnout. I had small illnesses all the time. And then I had really big, major, like life-threatening kinds of illnesses as well. Two of those, actually. So I ended up leaving academia, and I started doing this career wellness coaching work, diving into it, trying to learn about how to be well in my career. And what I found is that those toxic work habits I used in academia, I just brought with me to this new job. The reason I left academia so quickly is because my husband got a job. He was an academic at my same institution, and he got a job across the country. So I ended up leaving, and I was so happy to leave and thought, I can start this new gig and do it all differently. And then I ended up doing the same thing. So, I guess that's it. The core of my work is about self-compassion, like making decisions about your career, taking action in your career from a place of self-compassion. And I guess that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah. Okay. I'm excited to hear more about this story. So like when you were coming up on those, maybe the last few years as an academic, give us kind of what was going on with you getting up to that crisis point. You've mentioned health crises already, but maybe also about your time management, maybe also about your career progression, maybe also your money, like even more holistically. Let's hear more about that.
Yeah, 100%. Physical body was giving out. And I think had I been somebody who was a planner, like I never planned anything, like weekly planning, monthly, I never did any of it. That would have definitely helped with my overwhelm. My overwhelm definitely contributed to some of my health crises, for sure. So I was essentially just focusing only on my work, doing my work, and that was it. I was trying to shut out my life other than that in every way. I was a professor, and that was my identity, and this is what I did. And I wanted to prove to the people around me that I could do a good job and that I would do it well. So I would shut my door when I got into the office. And I could hear my colleagues banter outside the door, and I wouldn't communicate with them. I wouldn't hang out with them. I could hear them, and I would kind of have this longing of like, oh, it'd be nice to go hang out with them, but I can't. I've got to work. I remember, doing everything I could to push my daughter off on my mom. Like, can you take care of Mar? She needs you today because I have to work. I didn't look at, I didn't look at my weeks, as I said. I didn't look at my months. I never looked at my money. I didn't look at anything. The only thing that mattered was my work. And it's because I had this core belief that I was incompetent and I was bad and I was wrong. And it was these imposter feelings. And because of those, I shut everything else out and, not shockingly, got sick.
Wow. I can so see how your brand became what it is. Identifying that as the core issue inside your psychology that was kind of like fueling all of this. Was there ever going to be an end point? Or with that like core belief that you were incompetent, had you not left your job, would you just have continued, as you said, shutting out everything else in your life to only focus on the work?
Well, I think I did do that. I continued to shut out everything to focus on the work, even after I left. I remember having an argument with my husband right after he accepted this job across the country. And I was like, I'm fine leaving. This job sucks. It's not for me. I don't feel well. This is well after I had hit burnout. And so, my feelings were very different then. And I was like, let's go. Let's get out of here. And he's like, okay, I get that you want to start sort of this entrepreneurial work. And I just need to know, like, where are we money-wise? Like, when are we going to call it quits? Like, we can give it a shot. We can move. I can take over, paying for things and doing, supporting us. But then I need to know when when is sort of the breaking point when we're not going to be able to do it anymore. And I remember just getting really angry, like, this is my purpose in life. I'm pretty sure that we can manage it. We can figure this out. I can't believe you want a number. What is this number thing? And I remember getting really, really angry with him, and he was really angry with me. Like, he wanted some clarity. He wanted some sense that, we go into this. He knew, like, when the end point was. He needed that. And I was like, it's like I was offended by it. Like, no, this is my real work. This is the work I'm meant to be. How could you, question that kind of thing? And so I kind of shrugged him off, and he kind of let me, and he wasn't happy about it. And he carried a lot of sort of resentment about it. And we got here, and I'm in Denver now, where he got the job. And I ended up taking another faculty job to appease him. But then I got sick. I got really, 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 really sick, life-threateningly sick, and ended up having to quit 6 months later. And so it was this, like, it was the body was communicating things to me. My husband wanted some clarity about money. I didn't know how to plan my time out in a way that would, like, actually balance out my life. I was just sort of fully focused on my career and my new job, or I guess I should say my new career, what I felt was like my calling, my dharma, my purpose. And I was very, very, very imbalanced. And so we got here and started arranging our new life, and things just got more and more stressful, actually. And I guess a big part of that stress was lack of money, because I had to quit that job 6 months in, and then I had to try to build a business, and I refused to talk about money with my husband, and like all this stuff was happening.
Was he more clued in about the money than you were, or were you both kind of flying like in the dark?
So this is kind of how I think of it. I think of our relationship to money as like attachment style. If you're securely attached, you communicate with like your partner and your friends and the people around you in this way that is productive and loving and truthful and those kinds of things. Well, we have that same relationship to money. And if you don't have a secure attachment style, for me, I tend to be avoidant. I will avoid human relationships. I will avoid relationship to money. I will avoid relationship to time. And my husband, falls sort of on the other end of the spectrum, and he's anxious about everything, and he tries to push things into being, and it should work like this, and he gets really rigid about it. And so I would say that neither of us had a secure relationship to money. And in fact, we were talking about money in completely different ways. And each of our ways were like totally unhealthy, totally unhealthy, totally toxic. Yeah. And actually, as I recall this time, like I can feel the sort of pain in my body and the heaviness and the sadness. It was a hard time.
Yeah. And I think we're going to keep the conversation fairly focused around money today and its relationship with these other things. But clearly this was going on for you in multiple areas of your life, right? It's not just money. It's not just career. It's well beyond that. So you're speaking about this time in the past tense. So let's talk about like emerging from that or shifting it or healing from it or however you like conceptualize that. So like what's been the shift from like that point in time to now?
Turning into the reality that I need to have conversations with my husband about finances, which was really scary to me. When we first started, we have these weekly meetings every Tuesday, although we haven't had them for a few weeks, and it's making me nervous. But I would get shaky when we would sit down to talk about it, and he would get angry, and they were very stressful. And it was this like turning into like what's authentically happening right now as we talk about money. When I just like I said to you just now, like I can feel this in my body as I'm talking about it. Like I started saying that to him, like I can feel the shakiness showing up in my body, and I can feel like a sense that I want to run away really fast from this, and I don't want to have this conversation. And so being really honest. And then when I was doing that, he started telling me how he would feel. And often we'd have similar reactions. Like he wanted to run too. So the healing was really about like me finally just like turning into the reality that I had to develop a relationship with money. I had to develop a relationship with all of these things, with my husband, with, with time. And it was really scary. And if I compare that to where we are now, I would say that there's still definitely work to be done in terms of my own relationship to money, but also my relationship to my husband, when it relates to money, because that is like the hot point for us and has been for the 20 years that we've been married. Like it always has been. And so we continue to do the work. I can see when he kind of pulls out and it's like, I got to go to a meeting and I can't meet for our time. And then I feel like comfortable with that. Like, yeah, please go. And I don't have to worry about it or deal with it kind of thing. And so it's very easy for us to fall into that avoidant place where we don't talk about it and we don't think about it. And like I said, for the last few weeks, we haven't been doing it. And I'm like, I got to get back on it. I got to step back in. This is probably why I'm on the podcast right now, so that I can like force myself to do that. You know what I mean? Like I'm thinking about like divine intervention or something. I would say that so much of it has been about just holding myself in these difficult moments. I mean, just in the same way when I talk to my husband about money, I get nervous and scared and shaky. The same thing happens when I look at my money. When I look at the actual numbers and I'm tracking, and when I'm doing that every single day, which I've been doing, I really have to take a self-compassion break. I have to like hold my chest. I have to tell myself I'm not alone. I have to tell myself that everything is okay. I have to tell myself that I am competent and I can do this money thing. Like there's some real stuff that I need to do to get in a really good, secure relationship with money. And I'm doing it, but it's a process. And I think that's what I really want to impart to people. It's not just you look at the numbers and then, you quit avoiding and you transition and voila, you're there. It's not like that. There is some healing work and some time, and to know that I think is really important.
I'm very actually impressed that you and your husband have both been able to like identify that you want to avoid and that you want to run away and so forth, and yet have held yourselves to maybe not the weekly standard, but like a standard of meeting periodically and engaging with the subject and doing the work, as you were saying, like physically to get to that point where you can have those conversations. I'm wondering, in the time that it's been since you have been intentionally engaging with one another around the subject of money, what positive things you've been able to accomplish? Like, what keeps you coming back to the table, even though it has been so difficult?
I feel closer to him when I can hear the way he's thinking about things and the way he's framing sort of our money story. And he actually says to me, thank you, when I tell him, where I am and how I'm feeling. Like he's really valuing hearing me. And I can feel just this, like, I can feel a real tenderness that he has for me when I talk to him about my fears and when I talk to him about why this is so difficult for me. And that is absolutely the thing that keeps us coming back, right? Like, wow, to feel that sense of tenderness and care for each other when money for the 20 years we've been married has always been just fraught with pain and disdain and contempt. And so knowing that it's hard, but coming back feels really, really good. It feels like courageous, like I can do this, and I can love fiercely, and I can see he can do the same thing. So yeah, that's what comes up for me when you ask that.
That's incredible, and it speaks also, I think, greatly to your marriage, your partnership. I think there's various aspects of our lives that we can share with our partners. Not everybody shares money, and you're not even necessarily talking about the dollars and cents. You're talking about sharing the feelings and the fears and the dreams and so forth. And that's really precious, and it can bring people closer together the way that sharing other aspects of your life can as well. This is just kind of one of those examples. I'm really glad to hear that. That's really lovely. Is there anything else you want to talk about from kind of that first question, which is like coming to crisis point and how you came out of that?
I think this idea of Dharma, I'm a huge Stephen Cope fan. Stephen Cope talks about Dharma. He's a yogi and a psychotherapist, and he had his own like mid-career crisis as a therapist in Boston years and years ago. And during this time when I was in my tenure track job and I was feeling all the stress and all the pain, and my husband said to me, you like carry anxiety with you at all times. I would have like these Sunday mornings when I had an infant at home. I would go to the coffee shop and just read Stephen Cope, his work. And he had a book. What was it? I'm trying to see it on my shelf. I think it's called Yoga and the Search for True Self or something like that. Anyway, in it, when I was reading it at the coffee shop on those mornings when I was always anxious, and I'd have this from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. because I had a baby at home. 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. on Sunday mornings was this like, I can just kind of slip into this place where it feels like somebody understands me and the crisis I'm going through. And this is the person that also talks about purpose and Dharma from a sort of yogic philosophy. From particularly, he talks about the Bhagavad Gita, which is this scripture that helps us to understand purpose. And so that was the thing I think that got me. It was the thing that caused some arguments because my husband didn't get it. And he was like, I don't like this. Like, we can't have a conversation about money because you're so like, this is my purpose. This is what I do. This is what I want. He thought it was so lofty and ridiculous. So it caused that kind of problem. But what it did for me is the idea of having a dharma, the idea of having a purpose, and then just like putting to work the health of my body, time, money, all of those things in alignment with that sense of purpose. That was the thing that kept me moving, because those things bore me otherwise. Like, oh my gosh, time, money, it's boring, it's dumb, I hate it. But if I have like a real why about why I do it, like this is why I do it. For me, it was Dharma, knowing that I'm doing it because I know there are other faculty out there who are having a hard time, and I want to be able to be there for them, and I want to be able to heal, to help heal with them.
Emily here for a brief interlude. Tax season is in full swing, and the best place to go for information tailored to you as a graduate student, postdoc, or postbac is pfforphds.com/tax. From that page, I have linked to all of my free tax resources, many of which I have updated for this tax year. On that page, you will find podcast episodes, videos, and articles on all kinds of tax topics relevant to PhDs and PhDs-to-be. There are also opportunities to join the Personal Finance for PhDs mailing list to receive PDF summaries and spreadsheets that you can work with. Again, you can find all of these free resources linked from pfforphds.com/tax. Now back to the interview. would love to talk a little bit more about some of the things that you just mentioned. We've touched on this a couple times, the time management, the planning, the weekly plans, and so forth. And I want to kind of draw a comparison between managing your time and managing your money and see how well, strategies from one can transfer to the other, and maybe in some cases where they break down. And these things are very different and can't be thought of in a similar way. So tell me, having gone from someone who wasn't doing the management of time, and now presumably you're much better at it because you want it to be part, enabling you to do what you're here to do. Tell me a little bit about your practice of time management or how you teach other people about it. And let's just start talking through those analogies with money.
I do weekly planning in my program that I have for faculty. And every Friday we get together and we talk about our career wellness, I have them meditate on their career wellness destination. This is where I want to be. So let's step into that, let's feel into that. What is that? And then now let's set an intention for the week that supports that. I would say that as a person, I do things, I have to act on things before they sort of integrate. So I had to do the weekly planning with my people for a long time, for probably at least a year before I was really getting good at it sort of myself. And that same thing with my dissertation. When I wrote my dissertation, I had to be in the field. I did ethnographic research. I had to be in the field before I could really write my method section. I'm just not the kind of person who can put it out there, make a plan, and then move forward with it. I have to act on it. I have to feel it. It has to be part of me, kind of thing. So I think that that's the one thing, just developing a relationship with the plan every week. And that's the thing I say to them every time we come together. The purpose of weekly planning is to develop a relationship with our week so that we can self-compassionately protect ourselves, our future selves, protect, our needs and our wants, kind of thing. So it's this here's our why. This is why we're coming together, right? Here's the big why, the career wellness destination. Here's the little why. This is why we're doing it this week. And doing that with them every week after week after week after week, really allowed me to integrate that into me and to my own practice and develop my own relationship with time. Because before that, it was I would read what somebody said about time management and what somebody else said about time management, but until I made it my own, I really couldn't do it well. So there's always space for them to do it their way as well. It's not just about me, but I do always want to remind us all of the why before we do the planning.
Yes. So what I'm curious about in trying to draw an analogy with, we'll say budget planning, right, is the analogous area there. And it probably wouldn't happen on a weekly basis. It might be more of a monthly or quarterly kind of thing if we're talking about money. But what I'm wondering about is when you and the people you work with are creating these plans, what's the you said, we have to keep in mind our overall goal, career wellness goal. But then within that, are you emphasizing accomplishing something this week, or rather putting in time for something this week that will move your career forward versus just keeping your head above water and getting the grading and, all the stuff that doesn't really move the needle? Is that more what you're talking about? Making sure you make space for overall progress? Or is it more about scheduling in time for self-care or all of that? Or how do you think about maybe the different components of the week that should be present?
Yes, the bigger picture is we're trying to be more well in our careers. And so with that, we're always scheduling in rest. You spend 3 hours a week with each of your classes. Well, there needs to be 3 hours of rest time for you. Space that you get to do whatever you need to do to feel more connected to yourself, body, mind, spirit. So there's that piece. But then there's also the piece of let's figure out what our priorities are. This week I have all of these things on my list for work, but what's actually priority? And how can we, Martha Beck talks about, and I always use this, she talks about the 3 B's, right? How can we, like, if you look at something and you don't want to do it and you have this weird relationship to it, like, oh, I really don't want to work on this thing this week. How can you, 1, bag it? How can you, 2, barter it? Like, and she says barter it is just sort of like give it to somebody else, right? And 3, how can you better it? Like, I don't want to grade, but I'm going to sit in this chair that I love and listen to music that I love while I grade. And then I had a client once say, and then we should do botch it. So do it imperfectly. Right. And, so we go through that. Like, what are your list of to-dos? Now let's just get rid of let's get rid of all the things we can get rid of. Let's delay the things we can delay. Let's commit to doing things imperfectly, that kind of thing. And so now we're going to find our priorities for the week. Now we're going to find, like I said, our time that we're going to do rest. Now we're going to find time that we need to take care of ourselves. Like, are you scheduling lunch every day? You should have a lunch every day. And that is not something faculty ever think about, right? Like, oh, I haven't eaten for 12 hours. Like, that is common. That is very common. So those kinds of things, and just staying in relationship to the week and knowing that weekly relationship is going to contribute to the larger goal of career wellness.
I just love this advice on its own. I mean, if this were a time management podcast, we would just talk about it because I love that stuff. But I'm still trying to draw these like analogies with money. And I'm thinking about how when we're planning a budget, we have to plan for, and the typical term, which you actually mentioned earlier, is like needs and wants, and also saving. And I feel like the saving is more like the rest, actually, that you were just speaking about, because it's shoring up your ability to roll with punches in the future. It's shoring up your own health, both in the long term and in the short term. And so that to me is like, it's something that you can neglect on a weekly basis, monthly basis, maybe even for a year, maybe even for a few years, but it will come back with a vengeance if you never, ever address it. And it's so much better to build it in cyclically, like on a weekly basis, like you're talking about. So that to me is like a saving, kind of like saving, building in your own, again, ability to kind of continue to live your life with all the, like, you know, the punches that, you know, life is going to throw your way. And then also like thinking about the needs and the wants and the priorities, like you were saying about, okay, there's maybe a list of tasks that need to happen. There may be a list of things that you want to spend money on in the course of a month, let's say. And some of those are more important than others. Some of them can be delayed. Some of them can be frugalized. Some of them with a little bit of, you know, creativity, you might be able to do something for free or lower cost. Some things may just need to be deferred into the future. And so that's kind of the analogy I would draw there of like, but with money and probably with your time, you have some big rocks that are just standard, right? Like you got to pay your housing costs every single month. You have to spend a certain amount of money on food every single month. There's going to be some staples going on. But similarly in your time management, there are probably staples depending on what your job actually is and what your life consists of. There are some things you got to do every single day. Yeah. Do you have any comments on that?
I love the way you just broke that down and drew an alignment to money. And I will say that money is something I'm still building a relationship with. And so I don't think I can speak about it in the way I just spoke about time. Right. And so, and I think that's really important to say. Like, it's really important to be really honest about that. Like, every day I sit down and I do something that helps me to feel inspired with money, right? Like have a little mantra, or I tell myself, this is why I'm doing this. And then I look at my tracking, and just like developing that relationship that isn't a scared, shaky relationship feels like the only thing I can do right now. And so having this sort of big eagle view of my money at the moment is really hard. But having that eagle view versus mouse view, I'm again drawing from Martha Beck. Mouse view is this like, the little daily thing I can do to stay in relationship and to develop a deeper relationship. That's all I'm doing right now. And so talking about it in big, lofty terms with somebody who's an expert on this feels pretty intimidating because it's just not where I am yet. And I want people out there who really are hearing this and being like, oh my God, I can relate to that. And I'm scared and I want to get away from it. And hearing all the financial terms and hearing people who are really good at it talk about it all the time, that is scary and it makes me want to shut down. I want those people to hear me say that it takes time. And I know I just said it, but I want to say it again.
Thank you so much for pointing that out, because part of the purpose of this podcast is, and the listeners, hopefully regular listeners will know this, but you may not, is that I interview regular people. Like, yeah, they may be regular people who are willing to talk about money, which is not everybody in the population, but I don't interview other experts almost ever, because I think it's much more relatable, useful, actionable to hear from people who are more similar to the listener rather than more similar, like to me, who's like devoted my career to this, right? So like we already have one of me on the podcast. We don't necessarily need two, at least not every episode.
Totally.
So that's kind of my approach there. So I'm really, really glad that you said that. And I'm going to think more about this mouse view versus eagle view terminology that you just pointed out, and like, yeah, what can be done to draw the connections between the two? Like if you have an eagle view, how do you develop mouse, habits or actions? And if you only have mouse views and habits and actions, like how do you get up to the eagle view as well? Right. One thing I wanted to ask you about, again, in this analogy between like money and time management, is I really love automation in the area of money. And I'm wondering how much automation comes into your view of time management. And by automation, I could mean something as simple as like, well, actually, something you just said reminded me of Kendra Adachi of The Lazy Genius. Are you familiar with this brand?
No.
Okay. So what you said earlier that reminded me of her is that she is very intentional to schedule her lunch, because she realized that she was not taking lunch like ever, and that it was ineffective overall for her well-being and also for her work to not be taking lunch breaks. Anyway, one of her so-called lazy genius principles is decide once. And that's a form of automation. It's not necessarily carrying things out automatically, but it's, okay, I only had to think about this one time. This decision is going to last for a while, and I can just carry out that decision without revisiting it every single time it comes up. So that's kind of a form of automation. So yeah, I'm wondering what you think about that in the area of time management.
The thing that is really automation for me is when I sit down to do weekly planning, I have questions for inner wisdom. Because when you look at your week and you're like, I don't know how this is going to work, and I still need to contact this person and figure this logistic out and blah, 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 all these things are happening, right? And you don't always know the answers to everything. You don't always know how to exactly plan. How am I going to find the capacity to get such and such done this week? That might be an inner wisdom question or whatever it is. But if you just have those questions listed, and then they're not like taking up space in your brain, and they're not like, and you're not ruminating on it, and you're not getting like scared about that. And then after you know what your questions are, you take space to go listen to what the answers are. So now that I've done my weekly planning, I'm going to schedule some time this weekend to just go for a walk. And really I look at my questions before I go for my walk. And then I'm really just going to let the answers come to me as they need to, right? And trusting that they will. And they will. I mean, sometimes they'll say, don't do this yet, like pause and, postpone this until next month or something. They might not have an answer in that way, but at least you have some kind of an answer.
The automation is the listing of the questions and then scheduling reflection time. Again, because you mentioned earlier, like not wanting it to take over all of your brain space to ruminate on these questions. Like you're just going to give it a dedicated time where you're like, I know from doing this process many times, if I just have these questions working in my subconscious during this time, a few answers will arise.
100%.
I'm actually also thinking about in terms of automations, like routines. So have you developed, for example, a morning routine or a sitting down to work routine or an evening routine or anything like that? Or do you like those or do you recommend them?
I do. I love the getting up in the morning and doing what I've been calling a trust practice, which is just kind of like feeling into gratitude or feeling into a celebration of yourself or anything that's going to make you feel good. And I call them trust practices because they allow you to trust the moment, they allow you to trust your journey. And if you don't do them, you often will feel distrust and like you can't do the things you want to do in your life, like you're not going to be able to make it happen. So I would say one, some kind of a trust practice. And usually for me, I am thinking about things I'm grateful for, and I'm thinking about ways I'm really proud of myself. And in the evening, I'm always doing, right before bed, I'm always just taking a second to really feel into my career wellness destination. Just like, this is what I really want, and this is how it feels to have that. And I do that just because, those people who talk a lot, like in the spiritual world, right, and manifestation world, they talk about that, and how if you do that just before bed, it sort of sets your psyche up for the next day to do things that are in alignment with that. I also love Cal Newport's shutting it down thing at the end of the workday. Oh my gosh, I feel so much better when I do that. That kind of like, okay, I need to get this done, and this done first thing tomorrow. And then these are the things that I need to think through for the rest of the week. And then now I'm going to check the box because I have his calendar. I'm going to check the box that says shut down. I did the shutdown and I am done. And I've noticed that I don't look at my phone as much. When I do that, I just feel better and the whole day because I'm just intentional about how I spend my time.
I also have used Cal Newport's time block planner, which has that shutdown checkbox in it. And I don't always use it, but when I do, I certainly feel like a difference. And I'm actually trying to draw another analogy with money here. And this would, again, probably happen on a monthly or yearly basis instead of on a daily basis. But knowing when you can call something good enough and done, and that you don't need to devote the additional hours that day. Analogously, I've done enough with my money this month. I've hit my minimum goals. It's okay if I haven't used every single last dollar optimally or whatever. It's okay to have some flexibility and to set your goals realistically. Cal wouldn't want you to schedule, 12 hours of work into a 6-hour day. That's not feasible at all. And so similarly, you need to right size your money goals according to the means that you have at that time so that you're not in this dissatisfied feeling all the time. You have to get to a peaceful conclusion, at least some of the time, with your time and your money. So yeah, that's just another analogy I was thinking of there. I wonder if you could leave us with maybe one or two self-compassion strategies. You've actually already brought up a couple in the course of the interview, but maybe one or two more that you haven't brought up yet that we could use across different areas of life, wellness, or management, including money.
Yeah. So the first one I brought up was a self-compassion break. And this is from Kristen Neff and Chris Germer's work in Mindful Self-Compassion. And essentially, it is when you notice you're nervous, and it might be while you're planning. It might be while you're planning your week. It might be while you're working through your budget. It might be something else. Maybe it's even your body, right? I don't want to exercise right now. And everything in me is I don't want to exercise. And so a self-compassion break would be to just feel those feelings. Oh yeah, this is what it feels like in my body to feel terrible about this, whatever it is, the anxiety, the stress, the anger, whatever. And then you place your hands either over your chest or somewhere else that feels very supportive, right? You could cup your face, or you could hug yourself, whatever it is, but you're finding a way. And I really like wrapping a blanket around myself. Really just feeling the warmth of the blanket and letting and doing it tightly so you can really feel it tightly. But that sort of nervous system thing where you're really giving your nervous system some soothing. And then you're just going to lean into your own hands or into the blanket and let all the feelings you're feeling be there while it holds you or while your hands hold you. And then you just remind yourself, I am not alone in this. This is life, and life is hard. And everybody's on their own journey, and everybody deals with hardships, kind of thing. The other thing is you want to soothe yourself with words if you can find something that feels really good to you. So, this too shall pass, or I'm doing this for a reason. I'm doing this because I want to, for me, it would be to fulfill my dharma, whatever it is. So just you're holding yourself with your hands, you're holding yourself with your words, and you're reminding yourself you're not alone. Those are the big self-compassion pieces to a self-compassion break. So that's one way. The other way is just pausing. I think pausing is huge. Like, I'm moving through my day and I'm starting to get stressed and this is happening and I'm triggered. I just went to a faculty meeting and I'm triggered because faculty meetings are, I don't know why, they seem to be like triggering 80% of the time. But you walk out of there and for many of us, we just continue on with our day. And instead, pause. Right? And I could do this too, especially as I'm developing this relationship with money and I'm trying to heal my relationship with money.
Thank you so much for explaining how to be more self-compassionate in these, times when we might need a little bit of extra. And certainly I know there are people in the audience who are going to be feeling this with respect to money and will appreciate those strategies when it comes to opening up their bank account or meeting with their partner or whatever is causing that trigger to come up. So thank you so much for that. And if someone is listening and they realize that they're kind of in the audience of people that you serve, can you tell us just a tiny bit more about how they can find you, how they can learn more about your work and what it looks like to work with you?
Yeah, thank you. Selfcompassionateprofessor.com. You can go there and you can come to one of our monthly coffee chats where we just make space for career wellness. So we spend an hour every month, anybody who shows up, and we talk about anything you want to talk about, whether it's like toxic workplace, feeling like you are burned out, whatever it is. You come, you chat. It's free. It's an hour every month. Sign up. Selfcompassionateprofessor.com. Just click on coffee chats. And then I also have Self-Compassionate Professor, the podcast, for people who are interested in that as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And let's end with the question that I ask all of my guests, which is, what is your best financial advice for another early career PhD? And that can be something that we have touched on already in the interview, or it could be something completely new.
It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to have it all figured out. All you have to do is be in relationship to your money. That's all you have to do.
Could not have phrased it better myself. Thank you so much, Danielle. It was absolutely a pleasure to speak with you.
Yay! You too.
Listeners, thank you for joining me for this episode. I have a gift for you. You know that final question I ask of all my guests regarding their best financial advice? My team has collected short summaries of all the answers ever given on the podcast into a document that is updated with each new episode release. You can gain access to it by registering for my mailing list at pfforphds.com/advice. Would you like to access transcripts or videos of each episode? I link the show notes for each episode from pfforphds.com/podcast. See you in the next episode, and remember, you don't have to have a PhD to succeed with personal finance, but it helps. Nothing you hear on this podcast should be taken as financial, tax, or legal advice for any individual. The music is Stages of Awakening by Poddington Bear from the Free Music Archive and is shared under CC by NC. Podcast editing by me and show notes creation by Dr. Jill Hoffman.